Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Senators Roundtable. I'm your host, Jacob Billington, joined by my fantastic co hosts, Dayton Reimer and Paul Quinney, back in Canada. How was your trip, Paul?
Oh, it was great, but time to get back. I thought I was becoming Mexican, and also frankly, I didn't make the Mexican national hockey team, so
Gotta go back to the beer league.
yeah, unfortunately, yes, yeah.
How you doing, Dayton?
Good. Yeah. No, last week I went to a Blades game, so got to see them move on, beat the Raiders, Prince Albert Raiders.
Very exciting.
Yeah, it's always a good time.
All right, we're just gonna jump into things. There's not a whole bunch to talk or get excited about with the Senators game. We're recording this right after Ottawa and Florida played their game. Um, I do have a question for you though. Ottawa and Florida have played 4 times this season. How many wins does Ottawa have? That's the first question I'll ask you.
I unfortunately know this one. It's none.
It's none. Paul, I got a question for you. How many goals has Ottawa scored in those 4 games?
Gonna take a wild guess at it, Jacob. Five?
Lower.
Lower. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Wow.
Um, Ottawa in 4 games against the Pittsburgh Florida Panthers this season has been outscored 16-2 and has been shut out 3 times. That's not good.
They only got
Especially
two
like,
goals in one game.
yeah, they lost 3-2 in one game and they got shut out 3 times.
Yikes.
Like that is
Well,
terrible. And you look at Florida as a team that Ottawa could be, and but also like they have the style that Ottawa is kind of building towards. Ottawa is nowhere near them, not even in the same stratosphere.
Yeah, that's what I was going to point out, Jacob. If you really wanted to see just how far away from being a contender the Ottawa Senators are, all you needed to see was the game tonight, right? And I'm not knocking them for a lack of effort or a lack of physicality, but you saw how a cup contender like the Florida Panthers just neutralized them. And they didn't get very many quality shots, not much traffic in front of the net, and that's the only way you're going to beat a team like the Florida Panthers. They just couldn't get that traffic in there, and also if you make a mistake against a team like Florida, they will make you pay, and that's how they went down those 2 goals in the first period, and yet again chased the game.
Yeah, at least they did better this time, and it was 2-0 later in the first period and not in the first minute and a half like they did last time. Um, One thing about a team like Florida that I admire is having somebody like Sam Reinhart, who is a threat at 5-on-5 on the power play and shorthanded. There's never a time that Sam Reinhart's not going to be on the ice. And Ottawa needs a guy like that. They don't have any of those like really versatile players. Like you're not going to see Brady Tkachuk or Tim Stutzle did kill some penalties, but he shouldn't be. Um, Josh Norris, maybe a healthy Josh Norris, he can kill some penalties and do some work everywhere. But they don't have that true specialist. Well, not even a specialist, actually, the complete opposite. Somebody that can just do absolutely everything with that versatility.
But let me throw this out to you guys. I've been hearing lately that their identity is, they're a tough physical team. Okay, I would have said that they're too small to be that team.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think they
Yeah,
play the style, and I think that's correct that they play that style, but they're as a team, they're just not big enough.
yeah. So then it raises a question in my mind, if that's the direction they're going in, then this summer, are we looking for a acquisition of a bunch of tough guys, big guys, maybe journeymen that can add grit to the team?
Like Eric Goodbranson, Braden Coburn, Josh Brown. Like we've been through that and it still didn't work. I know you
All
can look
right.
at higher quality players than that, but like we've been through that with Pierre Dorion, and that's where I struggle with that because I think that's the right mindset to have. I just hope Steve Stais can make something actually work out of that.
Yeah.
Dayton, what are your thoughts on that?
One thought that keeps popping up is some Twitter stuff that I saw a while back it was about Tim Stutzle and how he might not have a place on this team. Now, I don't know if I agree with that, but it's kind of an interesting thought is if you are building a big physical team, does Tim Stutzle have a place on that? And I don't know if he does. I don't think they should go full Broad Street Bullies here, but yeah, I think if you are going to pick one way, you might lose one of your core members. If that makes sense. That's just kind of what's circulating in my head.
I strongly disagree. I think that Tim Stutzle absolutely has a place on this team, and he and Brady Tkachuk are the only cemented forwards on this team. But like you look at a team like Florida and you say, well, they kind of have some more skill guys up the middle, like Barkov, who's good, great two-way guy. Do you know how big Barkov is?
He's like 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah, he's 6'3".
Yeah.
In my mind, he's like 5'11". Like he doesn't play like a big guy, but he's still got the size. He can still push you around in front of the net.
Anton Lundell, he's on the smaller side, is he not?
I believe so. I can get that for you right now. But yeah, like everybody just plays with that style. He's 6'1", Anton Lundell.
Okay,
So
no, I was thinking of someone else then.
yeah, and you look at Vegas last year, winning the Stanley Cup. They didn't have anybody under 6 foot other than the Conn Smythe winner. Like that's insane.
Well, size is all well and good, but
How
you
you
got to be
use
able
it
to
is more
play
important.
for being big.
Yeah.
I think that's the important part. I don't really buy into all of the size. I think size is important, but it's not the big thing. Like you need to focus on skill first. And like I think it's just maybe a happenstance that all of Vegas's guys were over 6 feet because that's who they prioritized. And it just happened to be that all those big guys were good.
Yeah, that's fair. Paul, you were gonna say something?
Well, I was just gonna, note, I mean, this, what do you think the schizophrenia the team's suffering from is doing to them mentally? I mean, at the start of the season, they were a fast, high skill team. And now they're a physical team. I don't know what their identity is.
I don't think they have one. I think they
No.
want to have one, but I don't think they have one.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what was it, the last 20 games, maybe 15 games, Claude Giroux was talking about we've going to use these games to find our identity. Look, if at that point you don't have an identity, you're not going to get one in 15 games. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying with Stutzle is if your identity is a big, tough, lumbering, beat you until you can't move type of team, you don't have Stutzle on that team. If you're going for a young, fast, high skill, high octane, pain in the butt type of team, that's a Tim Stutzle team. And I think that's what you need to build for. You can't really lean into this, this high physical stuff. I think adding a Ridley Greig, adding a Brady Tkachuk, those are just like annoying. Those guys are awful to play against because they're really skilled and they know how to get it under other guys' skins. Zach Ostapchuk is the same way. He is a guy who will sit in front of the net and just bat pucks in, and you can't move him because he's 6'4". So that's a big, skilled guy. He's not going to, throw massive hits all over the place. He's not a blanking on all the big hitters now.
Cronwall. That's
there
just
we go.
The first big hitter that comes to mind for me.
Yeah. He's not a Cronwall, but he fits that team because he's also very fast. He's very skilled, and I think that's what the Senators need to lean into. The problem is for the last 7 years they've had a GM who's flip flopped between the two. Oh, let's get really high skill this draft. Oh, let's get more role player, more physical aspect for this draft. And then signing and trading for, big tough guys and then signing and trading for, low end skill guys. it's made a team that doesn't know what it is because they keep building different teams. And now you've got an owner and a GM and an assistant GM and associate GM, sorry. Some analytics. You've got guys who are focused on one thing. You've got a big team, and it's going to get even bigger, of people who are going to all be on the same page. And I'm really interested to see where that is. And I think they'll probably lean towards that high skill because they've got a lot of that already.
So I'm going to dumb everything that you just said down into one very simple question. Can you have a team led by Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stutzle? Can you have a successful team with both of them as the top end players?
Sure, you can.
Okay.
You just can't make it a Broad Street Bullies.
Yeah.
Like Brady Tkachuk is not Bobby Clark.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's good, but he's
Yeah.
not going to hurt you. I don't think he has it in him. He's tough, but he's not mean. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fair. He's not out there to hurt people.
Yeah.
He's out there to just make you feel every hit.
Yeah. The Flyers in the 70s were there to make you bleed.
Yeah, they're thugs.
Yeah. And I mean, it worked. That was my dad's favorite team growing up.
And our grandfather, Paul, over here. Sorry, I had to get that in. Paul, do you think that the Ottawa Senators can have a team built around Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stutzle? Can they find that balance?
Well, I think, to be successful, I think they've got to find that balance. I mean, it can't be all Tkachuk style, the gritty, fiery stuff. You've got to have some finesse in there ultimately. So I think they've got to balance the two. So yeah, I think they could.
Okay. And just to be clear, I 100% think they can too. And that's not at all where this conversation was planned to go. That's just where it went. So that wasn't, for those listening, that wasn't a big highlight or clickbait or anything. That's just where the conversation went. All right. So speaking of, Brady Tkachuk isn't out there to hurt you, and he's just tough and will hit you a lot. Against the New Jersey Devils, Brady Tkachuk registered an NHL record of 16 hits in a game. And that confused a lot of people because if you look it up, like Zdeno Chara has a 17 hit game in 1999, but they didn't officially start keeping score until the lockout. So since the lockout, Brady Tkachuk has the most hits in a game. So the game ended in quite a fun way. So Ridley Greig took a slap shot into an empty net against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and Morgan Rielly cross-checked him in the face. That was a whole shebang. We talked about the code. We talked about whether the code is a thing, whether it shouldn't be. Paul, I think you missed that week, and we had Alex back with us, and we talked about what a code was and whatnot, and we had some differing opinions, but in the end, we could agree that it warranted a response, but not the response that Morgan Rielly gave. So Nico Hischier is coming in on a breakaway at the dying seconds, and the buzzer goes, and he just kind of taps the puck into the empty net, and Brady Tkachuk goes after him like a madman. I have a couple questions that I want to ask you, but I'm going to start with, are they comparable? Is what Nico Hischier did and what Ridley Greig did the same? I'll ask you that first, Paul.
Well, I'd love to hear a coherent, cogent explanation from Tkachuk as to what constitutes an acceptable method of putting the puck in the net. Greig's slap shot in the dying seconds of that Leaf game, I'm assuming Tkachuk would approve of that. That's acceptable. But yet Hischier casually directing the puck, really with no effort, into the goal when the game's over. Suddenly, that's an egregious insult to the Senators' honor, and it has to be avenged. So I don't know. I mean, by the Greig reasoning, what he tried to do, I guess, was rub the Leafs' nose in it. That presumably crossed the line. So and those who defended Riley cross-checking Greig in retaliation, presumably then they'd say, well, a beating of Hischier, like Tkachuk tried to lay on him. Well, that's not warranted. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it just boggles my mind. I don't know when the way you put a puck in the net became such a big issue in the NHL. It is this year, but previously I'd never run across it.
Yeah, this isn't something that happens very often. Now it's happened twice with the Ottawa Senators. And I wonder if Nico Hischier had it in the back of his mind, saying, I wonder how they're going to react to this. You got to think that he was at least thinking it. Dayton, what do you think? Are they two comparable situations?
Initially, I was thinking no, but I think yes. I think they are comparable. Um, because I think they were both done with the intention of getting under the skin. Greig just did it a lot more in your face, right? It's a big slap shot. He's excited. He wants to score the goal. And he knows that, like, yeah, this is going to annoy the Leafs. And what Senator doesn't want to annoy the Leafs? Like, that's great. I don't think, well, I know he doesn't deserve to get cross-checked after that. But someone's going to come over and be like, hey, what are you doing? Hischier, I think, was also, not doing it as blatantly, but he's just tapping the puck in the net. Like, that's going to annoy them. And emotions are a little high right now, especially for the Sens, who haven't done anything with these last several games. And Brady loses it. And Hischier didn't expect Brady to come flying in and screaming at him and grab him and whatever. So, yeah, I think they're comparable. But I also think neither of them deserve the response that they got.
Well, it's just another example of Tkachuk going to downtown Crazy Town. Again, I think he looked like an idiot. I suppose to build off your point, Dayton, it was another attempt on his part to win some meaningless moral victory, to establish their identity and character. But, how about this, Brady? What if you guys just won the game instead of going down 3 goals in the first period? How about that? Would that work for you in terms of your honor? And, it's not like Hischier drilled a slap shot at Korpisalo when he was in goal after the buzzer went. I could see that warranting a reaction, but this was, come on, start acting like a leader, start acting like a captain. I mean, you can't go to Crazy Town over the slightest little thing every time. I mean, I think that's a problem with Tkachuk's leadership to this point. Grow up.
Fair enough. And so I think we're all going to kind of land on different thoughts on this because I think that both situations, I have no problem with it. Like, I have no problem with Ridley Greig taking the slap shot. I have no problem with Nico Hischier putting it in the empty net. That's whatever. But when you do those things, you are asking for a response. And I have no problem with there being a response. I have a problem with Morgan Rielly's response, but I don't have a problem if he goes over and tries to just wrestle him or whatever. And there's a big scrum and whatnot, maybe a couple fights. No problem with a response on that. That's what Greig was looking for, whether he can acknowledge that or not. And with Nico Hischier, I think that's exactly what he was looking for as well. Was just a response, sparking things up. I have no problem with some emotional responses after those kind of situations. Where I kind of laugh a little bit is that people are comparing the two and saying it's the exact same and failing to acknowledge that one is literally a written rule, one is literally an unwritten rule. And yeah, so in the NHL rulebook, I have it up in front of me. 11.1, unsportsmanlike conduct may also include, but is not limited to, the following actions, which would be penalized at the discretion of the referee. Example: shooting the puck at or near the goal after the whistle. So it's a penalty. It's a penalty in the rulebook. So I look at it and I say, Yes, he broke a rule. He broke a literal rule. Okay? Now, every time you break a rule in the NHL, you don't deserve to get punched in the face. But in this kind of situation, that warrants a response. People saying with the code and everything, well, that's the code. That's an unwritten rule. Nobody's worried about that. There's no code with this. This is literally a rule in the rule book.
I could call that
I,
what Hischier did a shot, I think is a little generous. That was barely a pass into the net.
If there was a goalie, it would count as a shot on goal.
I don't know. I like technically, I guess, but
Again, you're right. It wasn't a shot, but he put it into the empty net after the whistle.
yeah.
It's a penalty.
but the game, not to be a legal beagle here and split legal hairs, but the game was over. So you can't call a penalty when the game's over.
He did get a penalty. It is in the it's on the score sheet that he got a penalty at the end of the game.
Oh, really?
Unsportsmanlike conduct. Yep.
And corrected.
And again, it's not that deep. I guess we're going deeper than it really needs to be. But I don't have a problem with either situation. I think people are making too big of a deal out of it. Making a big deal out of the Ridley Greig one, that's fine, only because of the Morgan Riley response. I don't have a problem if the response is just some hockey toughness hitting each other and whatnot. I don't have a problem with that.
The only question I have is where can I buy a copy of the code? I've searched high and low for it.
You sound just like Alex. He said the same thing when he was on when you were away.
No.
Because the Europeans look at this and what is the code? I mean, I have no idea what I know what the code is, but anybody can make stuff up and well, it's part of the code, and it's ridiculous. It makes hockey look stupid.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, a lot of them are very old and outdated things that don't need to be relevant anymore. And I think one of the people blowing this out of proportion is probably Brady Tkachuk. I don't think it needed that response. That was reckless. That was unneeded, and it made the Senators look immature and unfit to be a playoff team, which they are not, right? Like that's not to overuse a term, but like that's kind of bush league. You're just running up to a guy, yelling at him, and then grabbing him. Like,
yeah, I
give him a little
one
push,
comment.
but you don't have to put him in a headlock. Like,
yeah, I can agree. I just think once a scrum starts, where it goes from there is kind of irrelevant to what happened before. It's more so just engaging in a scrum is the response. But then, yeah, I guess where it goes all depends on the person that's starting it, and that's Brady Tkachuk. And I think he took it a little bit too far. It didn't cross the line like Morgan Riley, but took it too far in terms of dignity, I guess.
I can agree with that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Last thing we're gonna get to here. Our next episode is going to be right after Ottawa and Boston play in Ottawa's final game of the season. That's a week from today. It's the last game of the year. Already. Yep. We're 9 days away from playoffs. It's pretty crazy. I want one word to describe the Ottawa Senators season. I know one word is tough because I have a lot of them for the Ottawa Senators. I'll start with you, Paul.
Failure. I mean, they really took a step back this year against. I remember the start of the year, all the expectations, all the hype. This is the year we're going to contend. We're going to be in the playoffs. Man, they really took a step back. They were closer last year, as bad as they were, than they are this year. So failure.
Dayton?
Got a couple. I'm going to go with a weird one. I'm going to go with patience. Everything was about waiting. Andlauer had to wait until September, like late September, to get the team. Pinto had to wait half the season to get back on the ice. The team had to wait half the season for him. They've got to wait for Norris to get healthy. They got to wait for Shabbat to get healthy. They got to wait for their goalies to figure it out. They got to wait for their coach to come. Like, there's no coach. They had to wait for their GM. That was 2-3 months. Everything's just been about waiting, and it's completely derailed all momentum, all progress that had been made. And yeah, like you said, Paul, they took a massive step backwards. I think there's a lot of minor positive signs that are pointing towards something better next year. But right now they're just signs, and it's all more waiting. Now we're just waiting for the draft.
Yeah. And there were signs saying this year would be positive as well as last year. You got to see
general
it.
manager helps though.
New general manager does help. That is the biggest sign. That's the billboard on the Vegas Strip. That's the biggest sign. My word is consequence. That's this whole season has been a consequence. So it started with Pinto and Dadonov. Those are very obvious, literal consequences. But then we look at how the Alex DeBrincat trade has panned out for Ottawa in 2024. Consequences of that trade suck for Ottawa. Shouldn't have made the first deal. In hindsight, again, you go back to that day, I'm still all on board for that deal. But in hindsight, shouldn't have made that deal, paying the consequences for that. Chychrun, not saying that deal never should have been done. Even today, I'm still kind of on the fence about it. But consequence. It's whether it's good or bad, that's the consequence. Winning the August Stanley Cup for Sens fans on Twitter. This is their consequence. They're getting the backlash on social media for it. Everybody's going and digging up the old tweets saying that Ottawa's going to make the playoffs. Those are your consequences. You got too excited too early, and I'm guilty for it as well. I thought Ottawa was going to make the playoffs this year. Signing Jonas Korpisalo. Here's your consequence. It's all consequences this year. This is what you get.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wrote an article early October last year, and 5 reasons why the Senators may not make the 2024 playoffs. I got trolled for it heavily, but when I look at the reasons for it, I said they were soft down the middle. I don't know what's going to change this summer. The bottom 6 scoring was a problem. A bad start. They were basically out of the playoffs realistically by the end of November. The Atlantic Division, ultra competitive division, questionable blue line, still questionable. And then goaltending, I didn't identify that one, but to your point, Jacob, who would have thunk it? I mean, Dorian's running around saying, hey, great news. I solved the goaltending problem in Ottawa. I signed Jonas Korpisalo. Not.
He did that when he acquired Matt Murray too.
Yeah. So there's, man, I don't know. I guess there's going to be changes this summer to the extent that Staios can make them. But boy, there's a pile of work to do with this team.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest issues with that, not that we have time to get into Josh Norris today, but Josh Norris's health, because you can't do anything with him while he's injured in the summer. So can't trade him, can't put him on, or can't buy him out. Can't do any of that if he's on LTIR. So,
yeah. Well, draft a center with their first round pick.
Yeah.
Or both of them.
Draft best player available, like we talked about Dayton.
Well, yes.
Hopefully it's a center, because that would make a lot of sense.
I would take Consta Helenius 7th overall.
Yeah, I think I would too.
I'd even consider taking Michael Brantzig-Nygaard 7th overall. A little bit of a reach, but I think it could pay off massively. And that's a pain in the butt type of center. Works hard, gets in your face, hits guys.
That is very true.
I like him. He's good.
It's very true.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to wrap things up for today. Thanks everybody for tuning in to the latest episode of the Senators Roundtable. Good episode today. Not a ton to talk about, but ended up having some good conversations come out of it. Next week, we're going to do our report card for the Ottawa Senators. We're going to give a grade for all the players. Expect a lot of low ones. So yeah, thanks for checking things out, and leave a like and a comment if you enjoyed, and we'll see you next week.